All right, so we're gonna start a new chapter. So this one is known as the absolute value function. Now it's a fairly long chapter, so I think we're gonna be doing this for the remaining 3 weeks that we have left. So the focus will be on this chapter or unit. So it will start off easy. Hopefully, today's class will not be too difficult, but please don't underestimate this chapter. I think it's one of the most challenging ones in this course. Um, so I'm hoping that today's video will not be too long, but the next video that I'm going to be making, I think that might be slightly long, okay, which is why I'm only going to be posting 2 videos this week, because I want to give you Wednesday as a free day so that you can catch up on your work and also do the homework questions. Okay, for this unit, I'm going to request you to do a lot of homework questions because you will need to practice a lot. It's just a confusing concept. Okay, so before we talk about absolute value, let's just refresh our memory. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video and answer these two questions, these starter questions. They deal with the order of operation. So in this case, you will have to rely on your friend BEDMAS, okay, to help you. Now, because you're not solving for anything, right? You're just simplifying this, but it's kind of hard to simplify because you have multiple things happening at once. So you have to kind of like understand what you should prioritize, and BEDMAS helps you determine that. Okay, so you start off I guess the number one priority goes to brackets, followed by exponents. Okay, exponent it comes in second. Now division and multiplication, they go together. Whichever one comes first, you have to do that first, okay? And then finally, you have, so I think I'm running out of colors. So let's just go with this one. Addition and subtraction, they come in last, okay? So, and again, you're going in the forward direction, okay? So BEDMAS in forward direction because you're just simplifying. When you're solving, you do it in backwards direction. So when it comes to algebra, it's in backwards direction, but when you're simplifying, it's in the forward direction, okay? So based on BEDMAS, right, BEDMAS tells me that I have to deal with my brackets first, but inside my bracket, I have multiplication and subtraction, and BEDMAS again tells me that I have to do multiplication before I subtract, okay? So let's do that. So this will equals to 5 squared minus 8 times 3 is 24 minus 4, right? And then 5 squared, so again, stick with the brackets, minus 24 minus 4 is just 20, right? And then now you have subtraction, you have exponent, so you would do the exponent first, and then this should give you 5 as your final answer, okay? So final answer over here is 5. Again, this is just a refresher. So here you have two brackets. So I'm going to focus on both of them. You also have an exponent, but remember, whatever is inside your bracket, that's what you need to prioritize. Okay, so we're going to do that. So inside my first bracket, again, I'm going to multiply first because multiplication, right, comes before subtraction. Okay, so 5 times 2 gives me, so 10, and then it's 10 minus 3 squared minus, in this bracket I have multiplication and I have division, okay? Now, multiplication and division, they have the same priority, okay? Whichever one comes first um, is what you have to do first, okay? So they have the same priority, but in this case, multiplication comes before division, so I'm going to multiply first, okay? So 10 times 4 is 40, and then you divide that by 20. So I'm just simplifying this, and then next I'm going to divide. Okay, so again, deal with your brackets first before you, I guess, apply the exponent. So 10 minus 3 is 7, right? And then this becomes 7 squared, and then over here I have 40 divided by 20, which is just 2. So this becomes 7 squared is 7 times 7, right? 49. And then this is just minus 2, so this becomes 47. Okay, so Just to refresh your memory, because we're gonna be practicing with the with this with absolute value. Okay, it's not gonna be this challenging, but BEDMAS will kind of come in handy. So now, the absolute value. Okay, so this is the definition. Okay, this is the definition. I'm just gonna put def for definition of the absolute value. Now, see, the reason why I'm saying that this is kind of confusing, it's because the definition itself might look somewhat intimidating. Okay, but I'm gonna make this very clear by giving you examples. But let me just go over the definition. Okay, so the absolute value of a real number a is defined as this stuff over here. So what does this mean? This tells you that if the number inside, so these two vertical line over here, these two vertical line, right? That's what we that's what we call an absolute value. Okay, so this is basically um, you have your absolute value and then you have a number inside. In this case, the number is a, but these two vertical lines are what we call an absolute value. Okay, so they're kind of like brackets, but they're straight. Okay, because they serve a different purpose. Okay, so this is what the definition tells you. If your number a inside your bracket is positive, right? Greater than equals to 0 means if it's positive, and then you leave it like that, okay? It doesn't change. If it's negative, you have to attach a minus sign to the number, right? Why do you attach a minus sign? Because you want to make it positive. Essentially, an absolute value will turn a negative number into a positive number and leave the positive number the way it is. Okay, so examples. Okay, so if I'm asking you to find absolute value of 7, right? Because 7 is already positive, your absolute value will do nothing to it, okay? And it will just give you 7 back because it's already positive. Now, if you have a negative number, let's say like negative 10, okay, because this number is negative, what the absolute value will do, right? Because now you're in this case, your number inside the absolute value, this is your a, happens to be negative. So what your absolute value will do is it will rewrite this number minus 10, okay? Whatever is inside, I'm just putting brackets just so that you don't get confused. You don't have to put brackets, okay? So all you have to do is recopy this number minus 10, but you have to attach a negative sign in front of it. Okay, so you're gonna have two negatives. That's why I was putting brackets, okay? So if you want, you could put brackets, but you don't have to. The reason why it's attaching that second negative is because it will make that number positive, okay? So basically you can skip this step if you want and go straight from here to there, okay? So what an absolute value does, right? This is your absolute value. These are vertical lines. It changes a negative number into a positive number, okay? So, so for example, absolute value of negative 4.5, okay? This is a decimal. It's negative, right? So what your absolute value will do is just turn this negative number into a positive number, right? But there's an intermediate step, right? The intermediate step is you can't just magically turn a negative number into a positive number. You have to do something to it, okay? So what the absolute value does is it multiplies that number, negative 4.5, right? So all it does is it takes this number, whatever the number is on the inside, and then multiplies it by a negative, right, or attaches an extra negative to it so that it becomes positive. And again, you're more than welcome to go from here to there directly, okay? Now, absolute value of 0, okay? So using the definition, 0 falls in this category, okay? So this tells you that if the number is positive or if it's equal to 0, it remains the same. So if it's 0, then it will just remain 0, okay? Now, if the number is positive, like 8, then it doesn't change. It remains 8. If it's negative 1,000, because it's negative, all your absolute value will do is make this number positive. Okay, so I hope this is kind of making sense. But the question becomes, how does it make it positive, right? It just attaches an extra negative sign to it, and the two negatives kind of like, you know, annihilate each other, and that's how you get a positive number. Okay, so the definition is kind of confusing, but I hope it's making sense, okay? Basically, what an absolute value does is it doesn't do anything to a positive number because it's already positive, doesn't do anything to 0, but if it's negative, if the number is negative, then it attaches an extra negative sign makes it positive. Okay. So now let's practice. Okay. So let's simplify these I guess let's evaluate these questions. Okay. So I have an absolute value of 4, so I'm going to simplify because it's already positive. I can just drop the absolute values and leave it like that. Minus, right? I have a minus sign. Now, I have absolute value of minus 6. Because this number is negative, what the absolute value will do is turn it into a positive number. Okay, so the minus 6 will become plus 6. Okay, it will just become positive, and then you can just do 4 minus 6, which will give you negative 2. Okay, in this case, again, treat your absolute value kind of like you treat your brackets. Okay, so even though there's a multiplication over here, start with your absolute value first. Okay, so it's kind of acts like brackets. Okay, so this would be your priority. Okay, so to simplify the absolute value, so I'm gonna rewrite this as equals 5 minus 3. Now inside my absolute value, what happens? I have to do 2 minus 7. 2 minus 7 is minus 5. Okay, so this is what I have, and then you have 5 minus 3. Now I have to take the absolute value of negative 5, okay? So what the absolute value will do is change that negative number into a positive number. So you're just going to have positive 5, but remember this is multiplication, which is why I'm just changing it into brackets, okay? So that we're still multiplying, but we're not multiplying by negative 5 because the absolute value will change that negative number into a positive number. Okay, so then it just becomes 5 minus 3 times 5 is 15. Again, you're going to multiply first before you subtract, right, using BEDMAS. So if you're confused, BEDMAS, remember you're just doing BEDMAS in forward direction, and then 15 minus 5 is just negative 10. Okay, now question C, I'm just going to do that over here because I'm running out of space. So again, now you have an absolute value, but inside your absolute value, you have brackets. So let's focus on the brackets first. So you have absolute value minus 2. 5 minus 7 is minus 2, and then you're squaring that, and then you're adding 6 to it, okay? So using BEDMAS, right, I simplified my brackets first because that's, the number one priority. And then now I have to apply the exponent, right, because that's number 2. So again, I'm going to keep this absolute value, okay, minus 2. I'm going to simplify from the inside first, okay? Everything on the inside will simplify, and whatever answer I get, I'm going to apply the absolute value at the very end to that, okay? So minus 2 squared is just 4 plus 6, okay? And then you're just going to have to multiply the 2 and the minus 2 and the 4 together to get minus 8 plus 6. And then this simplifies to minus 8 plus 6 is just minus 2. But the absolute value of minus 2, right? Remember the absolute value, all it does is it changes the negative number into a positive number, okay? So this is how you would do this. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to pause the video, okay? And do these 3 questions on your own, okay? So try doing those questions on your own. I'm going to proceed. So again, right? So start with the absolute value. So absolute value of negative 4 is just 4. Minus, right? There's a minus sign over here. Absolute value of negative 3 is just 3, okay? Because it just changes the negative number into a positive number. And then 4 minus 3 is just 1, okay? Now in this case, minus 12 plus 8 is minus 4, right? So I'm just simplifying this. Minus 12. Again, if you're not very comfortable with negative numbers, use your calculator. So minus 12 plus 8 is negative 4, but your absolute value will change this negative 4 into a positive 4. And just like the previous example, I'm going to do question C over here. So again, I have a multiplication, I have exponent, right? So BEDMAS, I'm going to focus on the exponent first. So if you want, this is just 12 times negative 3. 5 squared is 25, okay? Which is equals to 12 times 3 is 36, right? So 12 times negative 3 will be negative 36 plus 25, right? And, this will just simplify to minus 11, okay? So again, if you're not sure, how negatives kind of work, just Yeah, it's just I mean, you kind of need to it's kind of hard for me to explain this because to me it's very obvious. I kind of think of it as 36 minus 25, and then I'm attaching a negative to it. But again, if you're not very comfortable, right, there's many ways of doing it. You can think about the temperature, right? If it's minus 36 outside and the temperature goes up by 25, what will the temperature be? And you will come to a conclusion that it's minus 11. Another way to do this is just if you don't want to use the calculator, right? So on your number line, you're at negative 36. You're adding 25, so you're moving towards the right. So basically you're just doing 36 minus 25 but attaching a minus sign. Okay, zero would be somewhere over here. So again, if you're not comfortable with this, just use your calculator, and then the absolute value of minus 11 is just 11, positive 11. Okay. Also, I'm just going to point out something very quickly. So the absolute value is also available in your calculator, so you can actually write the whole thing in your calculator, but that's going to take more time than just doing it this way. Okay, so how do you use the absolute value? So if you open your graphing calculator, if you click on math, which is like, you have y is equals to, then there's a second function, and then alpha, and then math. If you click on math, and then click on the right arrow where, because you want to change this from math to, I think it's called numerical or number, I don't know, NUM. I think it's number. And then the first option is absolute value. Okay, so if you select one, then you're gonna have your absolute value over there. And if I put, let's say, absolute value of, let's say, minus um, 77 or something, and then you click on enter, and you'll get 77, right? Because all the absolute value does is change that negative number into a positive number. Okay, so just kind of like just understand what it does, and then everything else will hopefully make sense. Okay, um, so now if you understood this much, you should be good. But I'm just gonna go a little bit beyond and talk about some of the useful properties that I might be using in the future. I'm not too sure, but I'm going to introduce them to you, and then I'll illustrate that with an example. Okay, so these are some useful properties for absolute value. So as it turns out, the absolute value tends to distribute over multiplication, right? So kind of like radicals. Remember when we had square root of, let's say, a times b, then you can kind of like distribute your square root. So this is, you could, take the square root of a separately and then multiply that by the square root of b, right? So square root of a times b is the same as square root of a times square root of b. Okay, so using this logic, okay, the absolute value um, distributes over product. It also distributes over division. Okay, so kind of like, again, kind of like radicals. Remember when you had square root of a divided by b, and then you take the square root of that. It's the same as if you took the square root of a first and then divided by the square root of b. Okay, so absolute value kind of acts in the same way, but it does not distribute over addition. Okay, so absolute value of a plus b is not equals to absolute value of a plus absolute value of b. It turns out that it's actually always less than or equal to absolute value of A plus absolute value of B, which is what we called a triangle inequality. Okay, there's many forms of this. This is maybe one of the most useful properties if you're planning on taking advanced mathematics. This is something that you will see day in and day out. It's just very useful to prove basic, mathematical questions. Okay, so in your first year of university, if you're hoping to, I don't know, become a mathematician or something, this is something that will come in very handy. Okay, so that's why I wanted to introduce it. But we were probably not going to be using this in this class, but it's just an FYI. Um, so example. So what do I mean by that? So example one, right? So let's say if I have absolute value of 5 times negative 3. Okay, so if I work this out, I'm just going to do 5 times negative 3, which is negative 15, right? And then, um, and then this becomes a positive number, right? Because the absolute value changes it. So this is me doing the question without applying the property. But if I apply the property, if I do this question in a different way, then remember 5 times, if you want, minus 3, right? The absolute value distributes over product. So this is the same as using this property. It's the same as absolute value of 5 times absolute value of negative 3, which is equals to 5 times 3, which is equals to 15. Okay, so as you can see, my left hand side is 15, my right hand side is also 15. Okay, so I'm just kind of like giving you examples to show you that it's gonna work out. Now, it's the same thing for a division. Okay, I don't want to make the video too long, but so I'm not going to give you an example for a division, but you can come up with an example and try it out. See if the left hand side is actually equal to the right hand side, and it will be. Okay. Now let me show you why um, an absolute value fails to distribute over product. Okay, so I'm going to give you two examples. One example where it works, one example where it doesn't. Okay, so if I have, let's say, absolute value of 5, um, not 5, let's just go with a different number. So let's say 7 plus 4. Okay, so absolute value of 7 plus 4. Okay, if I don't use the property, is the same as, so you just add 7 and 4, so absolute value of 11 and absolute value of 11, because it's positive, remains the same, okay? Now, if I distribute, okay, if I distribute, then I'm going to get this is equals to the absolute value of 7 plus the absolute value of 4, which is equals to 7 plus 4, which is equals to 11. So it does work out, right? In this example, it does. And then I told you that I'm going to show you an example where it works, where it doesn't. So as it turns out, if you have two positive numbers inside, it will work. Okay, that's why you have this equal sign. So it happens that sometimes both of them will be equal. So it's possible that they will be equal, but this side might also be bigger than the left side. Okay, so the right side. So when is the right side bigger than the left side? So let's just change the question to -4. Okay, so what happens if you have -4? If you have -4, then 7 minus 4 is just 3. Absolute value of 3 is just 3, right? Now, if I have a minus over here, right? If I have a minus over here, then this becomes absolute value of 7, right? And now I'm using the right hand side, okay? So absolute value of 7, then there's a plus sign, plus, and then you have to take the absolute value of the second number, which is -4, okay? So absolute value of 7 is still 7, but absolute value of -4 is +4, which is equals to 11. And as you can see, they are not equal, okay? They are not equal. And as you can see, the right hand side is bigger, just like the property indicated. Okay, so the right hand side might sometimes be bigger, and the case only happens when one of the two numbers is negative. Both of them are positive, then you're good. Okay, or if both numbers are negative, I think then this is what will happen. Okay, but yeah, so triangle inequality, not super useful for this class, but I just wanted to show you that don't think that, and again, it's the same with radicals, right? Remember, square root of a plus b is not equals to square root of a plus square root of b, right? So it's the same case over here, but there is some relationship. Okay, it turns out this always happens to be bigger than, so this side over here happens to be bigger than that side. Okay, and that's not actually true for square roots or radicals. Okay, but it's true for absolute value, and that's a very useful property that you will talk more about in university. Okay, so again, this was kind of like just me giving you some extra information. So if you're confused about this stuff, don't worry too much about that. What I want you to do is I want you to do the homework questions. So here are the homework questions, and you don't have to use any of the properties in the homework question, but if you're interested, you could maybe use the properties and see if you're getting the right answers, right, to challenge yourself. Again, you don't have to use any of the properties, but if you do, you'll still get the right answer. Make sure you're doing most of the questions, guys, because this is a fairly um, complicated unit. Okay, so you need to practice. Yeah, so I think that would be it for this class. See you guys.